Welcome to this explainer, where we're going to illuminate the universal logic of language and completely decode this overwhelming wall of infinite data surrounding us today. Actually, let's think of our time together as a sort of conceptual film. We'll call it the spirit of expression. We're going to follow two metaphorical travelers, Salem and Jossus. They're wandering through a vast, modern digital desert, right? And suddenly they're standing in front of this towering, blinding structure we'll call the wall of infinite data. Picture it. Every scrolling feed, every smartphone notification, every random isolated statistic you see in a given day, all stacked up. It's totally mesmerizing, but man, it is deafening. So how does Salem and Jossus make any sense of it? And more importantly, how do we? Well, to survive this desert, we're going to use an ancient standard we call the lens of truth.
Real quick, here is our roadmap for today. 1. The void of raw data. 2. The architecture of meaning. 3. Cognitive alienation, or AJAMA. 4. AI and the cultural habitat. And finally, 5. The complete human being.
All right, Section 1. The void of raw data. We're starting right in the middle of this modern drought of meaning.
I really want you to ask yourself, how do you actually process the endless, massive streams of digital information hitting you every single day when it has zero context? Imagine our travelers Salem and Jossus pulling just one single glowing brick of data right out of that infinite wall. It's got numbers, it's got text, but there's no origin story. It's kind of like when a 10-second viral video pops up on your feed. You see an action happen, but you have literally no idea what went down 5 minutes before the camera started rolling or 5 minutes after. Without that before and after, without its real-world habitat, its environment of logic and culture, what is that piece of data really doing for you? Sure, it's stimulating, but it gives you absolutely zero understanding. It's just noise in the desert.
And here's the thing. That data, completely stripped of its habitat, leads to something called AJAMA. This leaves us cognitively alienated in this vast digital landscape. The sources identify AJAMA, which historically meant a sort of linguistic muteness or foreignness, as a profound cognitive failure. And here's a wild fact. AJAMA isn't just you not getting it. It's literally a misfire in your brain. It happens when you look at a piece of data entirely isolated from the soil it grew in. Your brain tries to ground the information, it finds nothing but empty air and glitch. You aren't just missing the point of a post or an article. Your mind is actually being alienated from reality itself.
Moving on to Section 2, the architecture of meaning. Let's look at how the Arabic understanding fixes this.
So to make sense of all this noise and cure that cognitive glitch, our travelers pull out the lens of truth. This is a universal linguistic framework that relies on three indispensable layers to bring any isolated piece of data to life. You can think of it as the ultimate antidote to the digital desert. You really can't just have one slice of this pie if you want true understanding. First up, you need syntax. That's the physical structure, the literal code or skeleton of the information. Second, morphology. This is the internal logic, the actual root weight of the words and how they talk to each other. And third, and this is absolutely crucial, pragmatics. Pragmatics is the cultural context. It's the rich, completely unwritten soil where the information actually lives and breathes. Let's see how Salem and Jossus apply this to build something from a meaningless structural skeleton into a glowing, living habitat of understanding. Now, steps 1 and 2, they give you the mechanics, but step 3 is where the magic happens. Just think of an everyday phrase like, yeah, right. The syntax is flawless, the morphology gives us two positive words, yeah and right. But if you don't know the pragmatics, if you don't understand the cultural habitat of sarcasm, you'd think the person was totally agreeing with you. But in human culture, yeah, right almost always means no way. A sentence can be mechanically perfect, but without the unwritten rules, the history, and the implicit human experiences behind it, it's just a cold, dead artifact stuck in that wall of infinite data.
Which brings us to Section 3, Cognitive Alienation and the Real Crisis of AJAMA.
Now check out this stark contrast between isolated data and integrated knowledge. Isolated data is super rigid and honestly incredibly easy to manipulate because it doesn't have any roots. You can twist that 10-second viral clip to mean whatever you want it to mean. But integrated knowledge, which uses our three-layered lens of truth, that naturally resists bias. It knows exactly why something was said, not just what was said. And this is exactly how Salem and Jossus learned to survive out there, by actively transforming dead, lifeless data into vibrant, context-aware knowledge.
Let's pause for a second and trace how humanity even ended up in this digital desert, because this philosophical progression is super fascinating.
Over 2,000 years ago, the Greeks gave us incredible logic and syntax, but it was kind of static. It categorized the world by rigid material stuff. Meanwhile, Eastern philosophies gave us this profound morphological depth and spiritual awareness, but they sometimes dissolved material reality entirely into pure spirit. Then, around the 14th century, we see the formalized emergence of what's called the Barzakh logic. It's this living, dynamic bridge that perfectly balances the material structure with the spiritual context. But today, in the 21st century, the pendulum was swung all the way back into a severe crisis. We're facing a JAMA again, an era where our tech feeds us relentless information, entirely stripped of both the human spirit and contextual reality.
That brings us perfectly to Section 4, AI and the Cultural Habitat, and the glaring limits of NLP.
We all know modern natural language processing, or NLP, is absolutely amazing at the architecture of grammar and logic. It can spit out a grammatically flawless essay in seconds. But as Salim and Jassas are standing in a desert with an AI companion, they notice a huge problem. The AI is totally failing to decode the wall. Why? Well, because while it has mastered the first two slices of our framework, syntax and morphology, it falls completely off a cliff when it hits the third. It has near zero proficiency in pragmatics. It just doesn't get the cultural context, the unspoken human elements, the living oasis where true meaning actually lives.
Looking at these two approaches side by side, we can see exactly why an AI struggles so much in the wild. It basically operates in a total vacuum without a cultural habitat. Remember the lens of truth? The AI is walking around with only two lenses. It's totally missing the third. So, it reads a sarcastic comment and takes it entirely literally, because it's completely blind to irony and unwritten cultural cues. It can map every single brick on that wall of infinite data, analyzing the syntax perfectly, but it cannot actually understand the wall the way our human travelers can. It can map the space, sure, but it absolutely cannot inhabit it.
0. That is exactly the amount of true, living meaning an AI can grasp without being embedded in a cultural and logical reality. Literally 0. Without a human habitat to root it, all that data just remains completely lifeless.
Which leads us to our final section, Section 5, the complete human being, moving way beyond simple data inputs.
So the big question is, how do we actually transcend the limitations of machines? Well, according to the foundational theories we're exploring in this explainer, it requires becoming a complete human being. Let's put this in super accessible terms. Think of nefs as your physical, localized hardware, your bodily awareness and your literal senses. Then, think of Fuad as your spiritual, contextual software, your deep intellect and intuition. If you only use your hardware, you're just a machine processing inputs. If you only use your software, you're totally untethered from reality. But a complete human uses the Barzakh. The Barzakh is the active, living bridge that constantly communicates between your hardware and your software. It harmonizes the material and the spiritual. By maintaining this bridge, you don't just sit there statically like a server rack, you achieve dynamic perfection, constantly growing and integrating all these new contexts.
I absolutely love this concept. An emergent ontological law might sound incredibly dense and academic, but in plain terms, it just means you aren't a basic 50-50 split of mind and body. In the math of human consciousness, 1 + 1 actually equals 3. When you take raw, physical data and you combine it with deep, human, spiritual context, you unlock a completely new, higher level of understanding. You literally create a third state. You don't just compute the world, you elevate it.
In the end, Salim and Jassas didn't conquer that wall of infinite data by building a bigger, faster computer. They conquered it by becoming the bridge themselves. They took those cold bricks of data, applied all 3 layers of the lens of truth, and planted a thriving cultural oasis right smack in the middle of the digital desert. True wisdom is that exact living intersection. You avoid cognitive alienation by always giving the information you consume a home, a context, and a clear human purpose.
So, I'm going to leave you with this final provocative thought. Next time you're scrolling through endless streams of isolated facts, take a second and ask yourself, are you truly understanding them, or is your brain just misfiring as you wander blindly? Ensure your knowledge always has a living habitat. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep searching for the true spirit of expression.